Mysterious Benedict Society and the Riddles of the Ages by Trenton Lee Stewart. Chapter 1. Surprising Arrivals and Rooftop Reunions. In a city called Stonetown, on a quiet street of spacious old houses and gracious old trees, a young man named Rainy Muldoon Perumal was contemplating at a door. The door, currently closed, belonged to his study on the third floor of one of those houses. In this case, a gray stoned edifice half covered in ivy, with a magnificent elm tree in its courtyard, and surrounding the courtyard, an iron old fence quite overgrown with roses. From his study window, Rainy might easily have been looked out upon that tree or those flowers, as he might have lifted his gaze to the sky, which on this fine spring morning was a lovely shade of cobalt blue. Instead, he sat at his desk in an attitude of attention, staring at the door, wondering who in the world could be standing on the other side. A stranger to be lurking in the hallway should have been impossible, given the fact of locked doors, security codes, and a trustworthy guard. Yet Rainy's ears had detected an unfamiliar tread. His ears were not particularly sharp. Indeed, his hearing, like almost everything else about him, was perfectly average. He had average brown eyes and hair, an average fair complexion, an average tendency to sing in the shower, and so on. But when it came to noticing things and understanding things and figuring things out, average could hardly describe him. He had been aware, for the last 30 seconds or so, of something different in the house. Preoccupied as he'd been with urgent matters, however, Rainy had given the signs little thought. The shriek and clang of the courtyard gate had raised no suspicions, for not a minute earlier he had spied Captain Plug, the diligent guard, leaving through that gate to make one of her rounds about the neighborhood. Hearing the sounds again after he turned from the window, Rainy had simply assumed the guard forgot something, or struck by the need for a bathroom. The sudden draft in his study, which always accompanied the opening of the front door downstairs, he had naturally attributed to the return of Captain Plug as well. He had wondered, vaguely, at the absence of her heavy footsteps below, but his mind had quickly conjured an image of that powerfully built woman taking a seat near the entrance to remove something from her boot. Too quickly, Rainy realized when he heard the unfamiliar tread in the hallway, and now he sat staring at the door with a great intensity of focus. A knock sounded, a light, tentative tapping, and in an instant Rainy's apprehension left him. There were people in Stonetown right now who would very much like to hurt him, but this, he could tell, was not one of them. "Come in," said Rainy, his tone inquisitive. There was no reply. He glanced at his watch, then at the clock on the wall, and then at the two-way radio that sat, silent for the moment, on his cluttered desk. "Come in," he called more forcefully. The doorknob rattled, slowly turned, and at last the door swung open, revealing, as Rainy had by this point already deduced, a child. It seemed the most unlikely of developments, but the fact remained. The stranger was, of all things, a little boy. "Well, hello," Rainy said to the boy, who stood grinning shyly with a hand on the doorknob, swinging the door back and forth. The boy's hair, very fine and black, was in a frightfully tangled state. His skin, of a light olive tone, was smudged here and there with a dark, oily substance, and stuck to various places on his shirt and trousers, both quite filthy, was the fur of at least two kinds of animals. But the boy's large eyes, so dark brown as to be almost black, were shining with excitement. "I'm Ty," said the boy, still swinging the door back and forth. "I'm 5. Rainy feigned confusion. "Wait, which is it? Are you Ty or are you 5? The boy giggled. "Both," he said, letting go of the doorknob and approaching Rainy's desk in a rush. He drew up short, resting his hands on the edge of the desk and his chin on the back of his hands. "My name is Ty Lee, and I'm 5 years old," he said without lifting his chin from his hands, and thus with some difficulty. "Oh!" Rainy exclaimed with another glance at his watch. "I think I understand now. Well, Ty, my name is—" "Rainy Muldoon," the boy interrupted with a delighted laugh. "I know where you are. I have a name that starts with M, too. My middle name does. I'm not going to tell you what it is, though. You have to guess." "It isn't Muldoon?" Rainy asked, quickly moving the radio, which Ty had noticed and reached for. "No," said Ty, laughing again. "Tell you what," Rainy said. "I'll make more guesses later, and I'll let you touch the radio later, too, okay? Right now it's important that we don't touch it. Right now we're expecting to hear from a friend," Ty gasped. "Is it Kate Weatherall, the great Kate Weather Machine, who always carries around a red bucket full of tools?" Rainy raised an eyebrow. "Well, she used to. Anyway, these days she's more of a utility belt and secret pockets kind of weather machine." A wistful expression crossed his face at this, like the shadow of a swiftly moving cloud. Rainy fixed the boy with a curious gaze. "You seem to know an awful lot about us, Ty." "You saved the world!" Ty whispered excitedly, as if he'd been bursting to let Rainy in on his secret, but knew he wasn't supposed to. "Oh, I wouldn't say the whole world," said Rainy with a skeptical look. "And I assume you're talking not just about me, but—" "All of you," Ty whispered. "The 4 of you, and Mr. Benedict, and Rhonda, and number 2, and Milligan." Here the boy frowned and consulted his fingers, counting off names in a whisper. He interrupted himself to scratch furiously at an itch on his arm, then began again. "Hold that thought, Ty," said Rainy, and raising his voice he said, "Intercom, Sticky's office." A beep sounded from a speaker on the wall near the door, and Ty whirled to look. The speaker hung at an imperfect angle, with a plaster peeling all the way around it, and was speckled with ancient paint. It would not appear to be a functioning speaker. Nonetheless, its green indicator light flickered to life, and after a brief initial crackling sound, a young man's voice rang out. "What's the word?" said the voice, quite loudly and brusquely. Ty gave a little jump. He glanced at Rainy, then gawked at the speaker again. "No word yet," Rainy replied. He cleared his throat. "But say, George, were you aware that a 5-year-old boy named Tylee has entered the house, evidently by himself, and is now standing here in my study with me?" There was a pause, another crackle. Then, "Huh. Right?" said Rainy, as if they had just discussed the matter at a length. "The timing is not exactly what one would wish. I'm guessing the timing has everything to do with it." Ty turned to Rainy with huge eyes. "Is that Sticky Washington?" he whispered, "who's read everything and knows everything and never forgets anything, but gets "That's him, all right," Rainy interrupted, "although lately he prefers his given name, George. And by the way, Ty, he can hear you even if you're whispering." Rainy couldn't have thought the little boy's eyes could get any wider, but wider they got, and 2 small hands flew up to cover his mouth. They were very dirty hands, too. Rainy supposed now wasn't the moment to discuss hygiene. "Hello, Ty," said the voice through the speaker. I look forward to meeting you." Ty made as if to clap his hands, then seemed to think better of it. He ran over to stand directly beneath the speaker. "Hi!" she shouted, gazing up at it. He stood on tiptoes, trying to reach it with an outstretched finger. Rainy leaped up from his desk. "Let's not touch the speaker either, okay, Ty? It might fall off. Let me find something you can touch, how about?" The speaker crackled. "So, Rainy, would you say this matter needs immediate attention or—" "Nope, I got it. Just keeping you in the loop." "Roger that. Intercom off." "Intercom off," echoed Rainy, and the green indicator light turned red. "It turned red," Ty declared, "so that means it's off." Right you are, said Rainy, casting about for something to give the little boy. Ty, seeing what he was up to, also looked around. The study in general was rather less cluttered and unruly than the desk, with less to offer his curious eye. Overstuffed bookshelves stood against every wall. An overstuffed chair stood in one corner, and behind the desk sat an antique chest covered with tidy stacks of papers, which Rainy now hastily began to clear away. One particular stack of papers, however, a thick bunch of envelopes, seemed to catch in Rainy's hands. Each envelope was addressed from one of the world's most prestigious universities. Most were still sealed, but the few letters that Rainy had read said almost exactly the same thing. Delighted to inform you, would be among the youngest ever to attend this university in its long, illustrious history, naturally covering your tuition and room and board, along with generous stipend for expenses, an extremely rare honor. If you will please reply as soon as. The envelopes all bore postmarks from months ago. Rainy had yet to reply. He looked at the stack in his hands for a long moment, as he had done many times in recent weeks, before finally setting it aside. Meanwhile, as this clearing away of papers seemed to be taking a minute, Ty turned and spotted, on the back of the door through which he had just entered, a large map of the greater Stonetown area. Concentrated in the center of the map, in the heart of Stonetown itself, were 13 pushpins. Ty counted them aloud, twice to be sure. Rainy, without looking, knew full well that Ty was counting, and as he felt beneath the lid of the locked chest for its 2 secret catches, he prepared himself for the inevitable question. Under normal circumstances, it would hardly seem wise to inform a young child those pushpins represented 13 of the most dangerous men in the world. That those men, just as the location of the pushpins suggested, were now gathered right here in Stonetown, and that Rainy's sole purpose at the present was to deal with them, which meant that the child, simply being associated with Rainy, might be in great peril. Ty's presence in Rainy's study was a clear indicator that these were decidedly not normal circumstances. However, perhaps given time, Rainy would sort out an appropriate answer. For now, he opted the distraction. 13, Ty said, finishing his recount and turning to ask the question. Do you know what the baker's dozen is, Ty? Rainy asked before the boy could open his mouth. Ty knitted his brow, thinking. He scratched his chest, and then, holding his palms out in a very adult-like fashion, announced, Well, a dozen is 12. I know that. Rainy couldn't help smiling. He tapped his nose and pointed at Ty. That's right. And if you had just more, some people call that a baker's dozen. Ty thought about this, making a great show of knitting his brow again. Then a look of understanding came into his eyes, and he laughed. You told me that because I was counting the pins, because there's 13. Right again, Rainy declared. He did not explain that the baker's dozen was the rather pleasant term that he and his friends used for some extremely unpleasant men, 11 of whom had just escaped from a supposedly escape-proof prison in Berg City. Nor did he explain that the breakout had been engineered by the remaining 2 men, who had been captured in the first place, with the assistance of a mysterious figure whose identity was yet unknown. Rainy said nothing of these troubling things. Instead, he opened the antique chest and said, Have you ever seen a kaleidoscope? By a way of reply, Ty dashed toward Rainy, stumbled over evidently nothing at all, recovered his balance, and arrived at Rainy's side with face alight and hands outstretched. Can I hold it? He asked, bouncing up and down on his toes. Can I look through it? Be very careful, Rainy said, placing the large kaleidoscope in the boy's hands. It's heavier than you think. He felt Ty's small hands dutifully tighten their grip. Only then did he let go. Ty studied the kaleidoscope reverently before putting it to his eye. His other eye remained wide open and directing it at Rainy's midsection. Wow, he breathed. This was on a submarine? Rainy blinked. You're thinking of a periscope. This is a kaleidoscope. It has colors. Try pointing it at the light. Without lowering the kaleidoscope, Ty turned his whole body around and craned his head upward. Oh, that's even better! Isn't it, though? Try closing your other eye. Ty tried ever so hard, but couldn't quite manage it. I'm still learning to wink, he said, half squinting in a way that gave him an air of great seriousness. He kept staring through the kaleidoscope, moving it slightly back and forth and uttering quiet expressions of delight. Rainy felt an urge to tussle the little boy's hair. He resisted, however, because of the tangles, and was instead about to pat Ty on the shoulder when the radio on his desk gave an extremely loud squawk. So sudden and loud was the noise, in fact, that Ty dropped the kaleidoscope. Or rather, did he not drop the kaleidoscope so much as fling it up and away from him, but only by diving forward with his hands outstretched and landing painfully on his belly did Rainy manage to catch it. For a moment he remained in that position, emitting an involuntary moan of both pain and relief. Hooray! Ty cheered. You caught it! He tumbled down onto the floor next to Rainy and lay with his face a few inches away. I'm sorry I dropped it, though, he whispered, and again Rainy noticed how the little boy's dark eyes shone. He also noticed how badly Ty needed to brush his teeth. That's okay, Rainy whispered back. I know you were trying to be careful. The radio squawked again. Rainy hauled himself to his feet. Ty followed suit, and together the two of them stood looking at the radio. Sometimes it takes a second or two, Rainy whispered. He opened a drawer in his desk, took out a peppermint from a tin, and handed it to Ty. Don't run or jump while you have that in your mouth, okay? Ty nodded happily, slipped the peppermint into his mouth, and went back to staring at the radio, which rewarded him with yet another squawk. This one was followed by the sound of a young woman's voice. Secret password, said the young woman. Are you there? Ty adjusted a knob on the radio, pressed a button, and replied, Roger that. To Ty he explained, Secret password is our secret password. It's just a joke. Ty giggled. Confirming all clear, came the young woman's voice. Copy that, confirming now. Rainy released the button and hailed Sticky's office on the intercom. We have her, he called. How's the frequency? Checking, came the reply, and then, all clear, Rainy said in the radio. Well, great, said the young woman. What's the word? Both major airports and all private airports compromised, still awaiting word from Grand Central. I got the word from Grand Central myself, also compromised. No, Rainy muttered. Then, remembering Ty, who was following everything with riveted attention, he glanced down and explained, I'm just a bit frustrated, Ty. Everything's going to be fine. Oh, good, Ty said brightly. He made a loud sucking sound on the peppermint, which seemed to fill his whole mouth. After a long pause, during which Rainy made various private calculations, the radio squawked again, and the young woman's voice returned. This time she sounded as if she was shouting in a windstorm. Stand by for ETA! That means estimate time of arrival, Rainy said to Ty, who nodded agreeably, though without evident signs of comprehension. We're not exactly sure where she is right now, Rainy went on, but my guess is that by tonight or tomorrow morning... Wait, why did it sound so windy? I wonder that too, Ty said. Oh boy, Rainy whispered, just as the radio sounded again. ETA 3 minutes, shouted the young woman. Give or take 30 seconds. Going silent now. We'll update you shortly. The radio went quiet. Did you get all that, George? Rainey said, as if into the air. I got it. Do you think it means what I think it means? I don't think it can mean anything else, do you? A long sigh issued from the intercom speaker. At least we won't have to wait long to see how this turns out. Ty tapped Rainey on the elbow. Why don't you just ask her what it means? Good question, Rainey said. Did you hear her say she was going silent? That means I couldn't get through to her even if I tried. We just have to. The radio squawked. Hi again, shouted the young woman. She rattled off a string of data. ETA 2 minutes. Meet me on the roof? Roger that, Rainey replied, shaking his head. What were those numbers and things? Ty asked. Coordinates and altitude, came the voice from the intercom, followed by another sigh. Here, Rainey said, removing the kaleidoscope lens and ushering Ty to the window. See, it's actually a spyglass, probably the best in the world. He handed the instrument to the astonished boy and showed him where to aim it. She's coming from the sky, Ty exclaimed. Evidently, Rainey murmured. He put a hand on Ty's shoulder. And that, my friend, pretty well sums up what you need to know about Kate Weatherall. Rainey returned to his desk, amused to hear the little boy repeating him in a whisper. Pretty well sums up. But also troubled by something he had yet to lay a mental finger on. He began flipping rapidly through various piles of papers and folders on his desk. What was he forgetting, he wondered, and why did it matter? Is she going to land away over there? Asked Ty, for Rainey had directed his aim to the northeast. The intercom speaker, with a crackle, exclaimed that a projectile possesses both vertical and horizontal velocities, to which Ty responded by asking if those were real words. She'll be coming in at an angle, Rainey muttered, and quite fast. Ty, meanwhile, had lowered the spyglass, which had grown heavy. When his thin arms had recovered, he raised it again and gasped. Far away, against the backdrop of blue sky, he could see a figure falling. I see her, he squealed and started jumping up and down. Good job, Rainey said distractedly. He glanced over his shoulder. Hey, what did I say about jumping? Also, please be careful with that spyglass. It's actually Kate's. Ty had already stopped jumping. Anyway, in order to hold the spyglass steady, the distant figure was now coming into focus. A young woman in a black flight suit, plummeting at a steep angle, arms tight against her sides. Yellow hair streamed like flames from the back of her visored helmet, which was fire engine red. There's a dot following her, Ty said. Oh, it's a bird! There's a bird following her. It's staffing just like she is. Stooping, said the intercom speaker. Stooping? That bird is her peregrine falcon, Madge. When falcons dive like that, it's called stooping. ETA 1 minute. Rainey, shall we head up there or not? I'm thinking it might be better not to watch. Rainey snapped to attention, realizing what had made him uneasy. George, he cried, fanning the pages of a bulky day planner. He found the page he wanted and jabbed his finger on an entry that read, Experiment 37B, effects of decreasing atmosphere pressure, etc., etc. What is it? The intercom speaker asked. More trouble? Well, on the night of the evacuation, you were scheduled to run your chemical experiments on the rooftop patio, but then everything went haywire. I don't suppose you cleared. The answer to his unfinished question was the banging open of a distant door, followed by footsteps charging down a hallway. Rainey flew to the window. An elderly neighbor had emerged to work in her flower bed, and a mail carrier was whistling down the sidewalk. depositing letters in mailboxes. The street was out of the question. It would have been a risky option. Anyway, he jumped back to the radio. "Hey, can you slow down at all?" "Copy that," came the reply. "Only a little, though." "She was doing this," said Ty from his place at the window. He clapped his hands to his side, narrowly avoiding striking the spyglass on the windowsill. "But now she's doing this." He threw out his arms and leg as if to do jumping jacks. Rainey was already hurrying from the studio. "That's great. Please be careful. I have to go to the roof now." "Wait for me!" Ty exclaimed, racing after him. Rainey ran pell-mell down the hallway, turning the corner just in time to see a large square section of the floor settling into place. He ran over to stand on it. "Sticky's already up there," he said as Ty got up. "Hang on, this is a shortcut." He stomped the floor 4 times, then grabbed Ty by the shoulders to steady him. A trapdoor in the ceiling fell open, and suddenly, with a terrific rattling sound, they were racing upward. Ty, thrilled, shouted something Rainey couldn't make out. They passed through the trapdoor and kept going, up and up, through a gloomy attic filled with seemingly infinite contraptions and oddments scattered in all directions, through yet another trapdoor in the attic ceiling, and at last into fresh air. "We're on the roof!" Ty exclaimed. "Yep," Rainey cried, leaping to an open instrument panel nearby. He threw a lever to secure the platform, then spun to face Ty. "Promise me you'll stay right here." Ty looked utterly amazed to be asked. "I promise," he said in a reverent tone, and clutched a spyglass to his chest. The rooftop patio, a flat expanse situated between 2 of the house gables, was about half the size of a tennis court. Ty would have little room for error under even the best of circumstances, and these were hardly those. Wind gusted fiercely from what seemed like every direction, sending scraps of paper dancing in the air like a wild mob of butterflies. Even worse, Rainey realized, those scraps were labels that had come loose from the innumerable stoppered beakers arraying on folded tables all across the patio. Every single one of those beakers, he knew, contained a different substance, or mixture of substances, some of them quite dangerous. Rainey glanced at the sky to the northeast. His eyes detected what might have been a tiny insect hovering a few inches above him, but he knew it was actually a far-off Kate. She hadn't even pulled her parachute yet. He glanced at Ty to make sure he was staying put. Yes, the boy was rooted to a spot, safely out of Kate's line of approach, and staring past Rainey with an expression of excited fascination. The expression was more than warranted, and Rainey knew, for moving frantically among the tables, snatching up beakers and placing them into a wicker basket, was George "Sticky" Washington. The young man looked exactly as the young boy watching had expected him to look, naturally slender and muscular. This was easy to determine, as Sticky wore tank top, shorts, and flip-flops, with light brown skin and a well-shaped, perfectly bald head. Tiny had also expected Sticky to be wearing unusually stylish new spectacles, and sure enough, he was. So stylish were the spectacles, in fact, and so well did they suit the young man's features that under different circumstances, Ty would have thought him an altogether dashing figure. Under the current circumstances, however, Sticky looked slightly ridiculous. His face was awash in panic and self-reproach, but his feet shuffled awkwardly in their flimsy sandals, and his basket was beginning to overflow with beakers, as if he were an overgrown, desperate child on some bizarre variety of Easter egg hunt. "There's no time to clear all of them," Sticky shouted as he worked. "I'm just getting the lethal ones." "The lethal ones?" echoed Rainey. He'd been thinking dangerous, which seemed more than sufficient. He glanced at the beakers on the nearest table. Only a few still had their labels. 2 days of rain, and now this wind had done their damage. What can I do? I set it all up like a chessboard, Sticky yelled, shoving a stopper into a beaker. 8 tables, 8 beakers per table. Got it, Rainy cried, seeing the pattern. Each table represented a row on the chessboard, each beaker space. So which ones? Without looking up from his desk, Sticky shouted chess notation instructions. A2, D4, and C5. I've got the rest. A2, D4, and C5. Rainy repeated, already hustling to grab A2, a stoppered beaker in the first spot on the second row. It contained a liquid of an alarming vermilion color, which Rainy tried not to think about as he scrambled around to the fourth table. D4 contained a colorless liquid that looked like water but moved like sludge when Rainy picked up the beaker. He shuddered. Fortunately, this one was stoppered too. He ducked under the table and came up next to C5, an open beaker full of what looked to be harmless black pebbles. Should there be a stopper to C5? Oh, yes, believe me, you don't want those to spill. Use the ones from C6, it's fine. Sticky shuffled past with his precariously full basket. This is all of them, he panted, his eyes swiveling skyward. He gave a yelp and doubled his pace. Rainy, here she is! Rainy, still shoving the stopper into the last beaker, didn't even have time to look up before he heard Kate's voice from shockingly close by. Get down, boys, I'm coming in hot. Rainy, clutching the beakers, dropped onto his back. In the next instant, his vision was filled with Kate Weatherall, a parachute, a glimpse of a sky, a falcon with wings widespread, and then the rooftop seemed to explode. Kate's boots, having cleared the first 4 tables, caught the 5th and 6th in quick successions. 2 rows of beakers shattered in a fraction of a second. The air was suddenly filled with glass, powder, liquid, and Kate. And still she continued, crashing through the 7th and 8th tables, her parachute dragging behind her, gathering wreckage. And still she crashed right across the end of the rooftop patio, through the low railing and out of sight. Her parachute, full of debris, dragged after her to the broken railing where it caught and held. Rainy sat up. He glanced at Sticky, who was crouching with the basket in his arms and his jaw hanging slack, and then at Ty, whose eyes seemed too huge for his head. Rainy peered back across the rooftop patio. A purplish haze, not exactly smoke, shifted this way and that in the contractory breezes. For a moment, the 3 of them stared at the parachute in shocked silence, and then they found themselves staring at 2 gloved hands, which had appeared from beyond the patio edge, clutching at the parachute silk. The hands were followed by a fire engine red helmet, and finally, in a black flight suit. Boots crunched on broken glass. Gloved hands went up to remove the visored helmet, and there stood Kate Weatherall, grinning. Hi, boys, he said, brushing glass and splinters from her broad shoulders. She gestured at Ty. Who's this little guy? Rainy and Sticky, neither recovered enough to speak yet, exchanged a look. Ty, on the other hand, was bouncing up and down. I'm Ty, he squeaked excitedly. Rainy, let me hold your spyglass. I see that, said Kate, leveling an accusing look at Rainy before bursting into a laugh and striding forward to greet him. Rainy, who had long ago learned that Kate's greetings could be painfully enthusiastic, was quick to show her the beakers. We're holding dangerous chemicals, Kate, he said, climbing unsteadily to his feet. Why would you be doing that? Kate asked, laughing again. You boys need to be more careful. She gave him a peck on the cheek, then swooped over to Sticky, who flinched, to do the same. At the sight of Ty raising his own cheek expectantly, Kate put on a dubious look. Let's get you a bath first, mister. Have you seen your face? With a worried expression, Ty shook his head. Kate pretended to be shocked. What? Never? You've never seen your own face? At this, Ty giggled, and with a quick, Fine, one kiss for the dust bunny. Kate swooped in on him too. As Rainy and Sticky had very carefully put down their burdens, the three friends stood regarding one another. Despite having grown at different rates, they had all arrived, perhaps only temporary, but still much to their amusement, at precisely the same height. Thus Rainy's and Sticky's brown eyes were at the same level as Kate's familiar ocean blues, but that was not the reason they communicated so much and so easily without speaking. The three of them had been through more together as children than most people experience in a lifetime, and they had been best friends for years. So it was that everything they had been through, not just over the years, but also in the last few days, everything that remained to be done, everything still at risk, these things and more passed among them without a word. "Boy, am I hungry," Kate said, breaking the silence. She reached up to retie her ponytail. A sprinkle of debris fell from her hair and was carried off by the wind. "Are we under imminent attack, or is there time for a sandwich?" "We don't think they're making a move today," Winnie said. "They're holed up in different parts of the city, awaiting some sort of message, most likely instructions from Mr. Curtin, though we don't know how they're going to manage that. It's not like he'll be granted permission to make a quick phone call to his former henchman." "I should say not. And Mr. Benedict? He's safe at the moment, as long as he stays put." "Super," said Kate. "How about we have some lunch and catch up then? I especially want to know how you," this she said to Ty, who stood in the middle of their circle, gazing up at their faces, "came to be here." "I want to know the same thing," said Sticky. "By the way, Ty, it's nice to meet you in person. I'm George," he said with some hesitation, for like his friends, Sticky still thought of himself as Sticky, despite his recent declaration to the contrary. He extended his hand, and Ty, beaming, shook it so energetically with his free hand that his other one almost dropped the spyglass. "How did you come to be here anyway?" Kate pressed Ty, kneeling to be on eye level with him, and reaching ever so subtly to take hold of the spyglass. Ty shrugged and scratched his chest. "She told me how. She told me all about you, and she gave me directions, and she kept me company the whole time." Lowering his voice secretively, she added, "Even though I couldn't see her." Kate raised an eyebrow. "Even though, oh boy," Sticky muttered. "I wondered," said Rainy, nodding. I figured." "That's right," called a strident voice from behind them. "I told him. I brought him here. If not for me, he'd be in hot water right now. I guess you're all having your happy reunion on the roof without me. You don't even send the platform back down. You make me take the stairs." By this point, everyone had turned toward the stairwell door, in the frame of which stood, with arms crossed and eyes flashing, a very angry-looking girl. "Hi, Constance," sighed Kate. And just like that, the society was reconvened. End of chapter 1.